No matter how many different iterations of Batman have existed over the years, a certain audience will always see colorful words explode across their memory of the Caped Crusader. Biff, kapow, crash! For while The Dark Knight has become progressively darker, there's no forgetting the brief period when the universe of Batman was a cartoonish, campy riot, filled with tongue-in-cheek dialogue, scenery-chewing performances, and some very snug outfits. Comic books aside, it might seem a little hard to believe that, for years, the 1960s TV show was essentially what people thought of when they pictured Gotham's secretive hero, at least until 1989, when Tim Burton forever altered the way Batman was viewed by the world. The TV series starring Adam West and Burt Ward ran for 3 seasons on ABC, but Bat fans got an extra dose of Batman soon after the first season concluded with Batman the Movie, essentially a supersized episode that brought 4 of Batman's most famous foes together in one zany, candy-colored package. It contains some of the weirdest, wildest moments you could possibly find in a movie about the Caped Crusader. Holy history lessons to the Batcave to find out what the f*** happened to this movie. The origins of Batman go all the way back to 1939, when the character first appeared in issue number 27 of Detective Comics. The popular hero's first stint in front of the camera came in 1943, with a 15-chapter serial series that played in theaters to some success. That serial was subsequently re-released in 1965 to considerable enthusiasm, which kickstarted the idea of reviving the character for a brand new series, this time made for television. Assigned to help bring it to life was producer William Dozier, once a film producer who turned his attention to the exciting and relatively new world of television in the mid-1950s. Dozier was reportedly not particularly excited by the prospect of doing a Batman series for network TV, but he soon realized the potential of the title, figuring if he could make it appeal to both children and adults, he would be able to give ABC the hit show they were desperately seeking. The series was to be infused with what Dozier called, quote, the pop art technique of the exaggerated cliché, which was another way of saying it would be campy and filled with Dutch angles and escapist entertainment. He thought doing a straight adaptation of the comics would not work, so he set out to deliberately overdo everything in order to appeal to a larger audience. Incidentally, Dozier himself took on the role as the show's regular narrator, teasing the next episode's villains and urging viewers to tune in during the same bat time on the same bat channel. Initially, a Batman movie was going to be shot before the TV series, sort of a larger-than-life pilot to introduce audiences to the vivid new world of the character. But at the time, ABC's ratings were in the toilet, and they sped up production on the TV series in order to get it on the tube as quickly as possible. Premiering in January of 1966, the show was an instant smash, airing 2 times a week to the delight of millions of Americans. The idea of doing a movie then returned, this time to help sell the film to an even larger audience, particularly international markets. Color television was not widespread around the globe until the late 60s, so the movie would be the first opportunity many people overseas would have had to see Batman in all its vibrant glory. Additionally, Batman merchandise was selling very well at the time, thanks to the success of the series, and so the producers saw an opportunity to really strike while the iron was hot. In March 1966, Batman the Movie was officially announced in Variety. It was stated that a large portion of the main cast would return, as well as most of the TV show's production team. What was not publicly known at the time was that the film almost did not feature Batman and Robin's actors Adam West and Burt Ward. According to a 20th Century Fox memo that leaked many years later, Adam West was asking for a salary of $150,000, indeed a very large sum for the time. If the studio did not agree to that demand, West would accept $100,000 with the understanding that he was to be given a star vehicle the next year at a salary of $125,000. Allegedly, Burt Ward was making a similar demand for a substantial raise to co-star in the film. But Fox flinched at this, and the studio was prepared to move forward without West or Ward in the roles they made immensely popular. The internal memo revealed they were actually going to start auditioning new actors immediately in order to stay on schedule. However, deals with the 2 leads were ultimately reached, and the dynamic duo went back to the Batcave, with West supposedly pocketing $100,000 while Ward received $35,000. However, West did get one of his specific requests met. The actor wanted the movie to feature more Bruce Wayne, as the majority of his face was typically concealed by Batman's mask during the TV series. The producers agreed, leading to a handful of extended sequences in the movie featuring Bruce Wayne out of his famous costume. At the studio's request, the story was to feature 4 of the show's most prominent villains, and so Burgess Meredith reprised his iconic Penguin, Frank Gorshin came back as the Riddler, Cesar Romero and his barely disguised mustache returned as the Joker, and Julie Newmar would slink onto the screen once more as Catwoman. Principal photography was slated to begin in April of 1966, but it was delayed when it became apparent that Julie Newmar was not going to be able to fulfill her obligation to the part of Catwoman. The reason has been the subject of debate over the years. Some say it was just a conflict in her schedule, as she was just about to start work on another project, while it's also been suggested that she had sustained an injury and would be unable to perform the physicality required for the role. Either way, Newmar was replaced with former Miss America Lee Merriweather, and production was pushed back about 2 weeks. Merriweather had only appeared in one movie prior to Batman, but was a regular fixture on television. Merriweather claimed she got the part after curling up in the chair at her audition and licking her hand like a paw. The script for Batman the movie was supposedly written in just 10 days by Lorenzo Semple Jr., who had helped develop the TV series and wrote several episodes. The story would find the villain quartet, calling themselves United Underworld, formulating a fiendish plot to dehydrate the Global Security Council, while the world's greatest detective and the Boy Wonder use their bat devices, flying fists, and peerless powers of deduction to solve the perplexing puzzles and thwart the evil plans. Shooting would take place over the course of about 30 days in Los Angeles. Director Leslie Martinson, a TV veteran who also directed 2 episodes of the series, would sit behind the camera for the production. The budget for Batman was estimated to be around $1.3 million, approximately 20 times the average cost of a single episode, indicating the studio's faith in the project. The larger budget allowed for some cool new Bat toys to be introduced, such as the Bat Copter and the Bat Boat. The latter, no, not the Bat Ladder, was an original creation by a Texas-based company called Glastron Industries. As thanks for their work on the film, the studio held the world premiere in Austin, where the company's headquarters was located. The helicopter, however, was an already functioning vehicle which was leased by the studio for $750 a day, and was appropriately modified to suit the hero's snazzy style. Footage of the Batboat and Batcopter shot during the film's production was later edited into TV episodes when needed. One of the film's most memorable sequences is the hilarious madcap moment when Batman desperately tries to safely dispose of a bomb. The sequence goes on for an amusingly long stretch, about 3 minutes of screen time, but according to West, shooting the sequence took somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 hours. Martinson said he improvised some moments like the ducks and the young lovers on the day, protracting Batman's dilemma even further.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
West later mused that it was fortunate he was in decent shape at the time, otherwise he would not have been able to run around like that all day. A more frightening incident happened during filming in a water tank on Fox's ranch in Malibu, when Batman and Robin infiltrate the Penguin's submarine. One of the stuntmen playing a Penguin henchman slipped off the subsurface and smacked his head on the shallow bottom underwater. He split his head open and was knocked unconscious, and this apparently went unnoticed for a brief period after the director called cut. Thankfully, he was retrieved and brought to the hospital and eventually recovered. That wasn't the only danger. According to Lee Merriweather, her catsuit costume was very uncomfortable to wear, so much that when outside in the scorching sun, she got severe burns on her shoulders. Ouch! Perhaps the film's most infamous sequence involves a rubber shark and, naturally, some shark-repellent bat spray to get rid of it. While apparently no qualms were raised about this ridiculous-looking effect during production, evidently producers were not happy with the final result of this scene because of the sound effects of Batman punching the shark. Because yeah, that's what seemed silly about this scene, the sound effects. Adam West reminded them that the shark looked incredibly fake, hence the sound effects didn't really matter. After all, this was the Batman that everyone already knew and loved. One thing Adam West and Burt Ward appreciated was that they only had to focus on one script for the entirety of the shoot. On the series, sometimes they would be shooting sequences for multiple episodes on the same day, meaning if they were shooting in a particular location that would appear in several episodes, it was more efficient to shoot the material for 2 or 3 different episodes on the same day. This, of course, would lead to some confusion for West and Ward, who sometimes did not know which episode they were working on at any given time. Clearly, it was not an issue on the movie set. While the cast and crew generally enjoyed the filmmaking process and camaraderie, there was, however, apparently an issue with one particular inflated ego. According to producer William Dozier, young Burt Ward had started believing his own hype, and once delayed production over supposed concerns about on-set pyrotechnics potentially damaging what he called his, quote, $1 million face. Holy arrogance, Batman! But a stern lecture from Dozier put the Boy Wonder in his place, and quickly got filming back on track, with no further difficulties reported. Batman the movie was released in August of 1966, mere months after production had started. The premiere was held at the Paramount Theater in Austin, Texas, where several of the actors actually showed up in costume. The timing of the premiere was lucky, taking place just 2 days before the terrible mass shooting at nearby University of Texas. Holy near misses. The movie did not perform exceptionally well in the States, eventually collecting somewhere around $4 million in grosses. One theory for the tepid response was that the audience just didn't want to go and pay for something that they were already watching on television at home. However, the film apparently played better in international territories where the Batman series wasn't quite as well known. At the very least, the Bat brand was expanding. Even though it was not a huge box office hit, a sequel film was tentatively planned by the studio. It would have arrived in theaters between seasons 2 and 3, just as the first movie had come out between seasons 1 and 2. But as season 2 was airing, the ratings for the show began to decline. It appeared that Batman fatigue was settling in. This prompted the decision to scrap the second Batman movie, which would have focused on the introduction of Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. The character was instead brought into the series' third and final season, after which ABC pulled the plug due to plunging ratings. William Dozier, who also produced The Green Hornet and made attempts to bring Wonder Woman and Dick Tracy to the small screen, retired from producing in 1969. Lorenzo Semple Jr. went on to write movies like 3 Days of the Condor, Never Say Never Again, and another colorful camp classic, Flash Gordon. Adam West and Burt Ward were never quite able to shake the typecasting of their iconic costumed roles, but eventually they embraced the show's devoted fan base, making regular convention appearances together right up until West's death in 2017. As we're all aware, the end of the TV series was far from the end for Batman. Thanks to persevering on comic pages for decades, the character eventually returned to big screen life in 1989 and has not looked back. Having appeared in over a dozen live-action and animated movies, Batman is still one of the most famous superheroes in the world. For some, the Adam West Batman in all his kitschy, deadpan glory remains the quintessential version of the character. But whether he's gleefully dancing the Batusi or busting heads in a neo-noir hellscape, the Caped Crusader keeps coming back again and again, and not a bomb or a bullet or a squad of supervillains or an explosive shark can stop him. Holy longevity, Batman!
Before we continue with our video, here's a reminder to click the Store tab on any of our JoBlo channels and browse our collection of the latest and freshest designs in our merch store. Go get you some.
The year is 1978. Grease and Animal House are two of the highest grossers of the year. This couldn't be further from the current era of superhero films reigning supreme over the box office. But what's that up in the sky? It's a bird. It's a plane. No, it's... Superman? Huh, been a while. With everything that the DC Cinematic Universe has become over the last decade, it felt like time to go way back to the films that started it all. So we're going back to the beginning and revisiting all the colorful spandex, flamboyant villains, and A-listers along the way. First up, we've got the one that started it all with DC Revisited, Superman. DC Comics has had a slew of successful superheroes over the years. They pop from the page with their bright colors, and the time had come to see them on the big screen. While lesser serials had been released prior, the most successful of which being the Adam West starring Batman the movie, it was finally time for a bigger superhero on the screen. Enter Superman, and enter young entrepreneur Ilya Salkind. Salkind, a Mexican producer following in the family business, joined forces with his father Alexander and Pierre Spangler to purchase the film rights to Superman in 1974. Salkind's grand plan was to film the first two Superman films back to back. This meant a longer shooting schedule, but massive sets like the Fortress of Solitude wouldn't need to be stored in between films or entirely rebuilt from scratch. So the plan seemed foolproof. Salkind just needed a director that could manage his vision. Or more appropriately, the budget. The total budget for the film was set at $55 million, which translates to over $200 million when adjusting for inflation. So this was a very big gamble, especially since superheroes were not the known commodity that they are now. And seeing as how they weren't exactly established, there weren't any directors to go to that had immediate first-hand knowledge on how to properly make this kind of film. Given the innovation needed, Salkind looked to James Bond mainstay Guy Hamilton to direct the feature. The deal fell apart, however, when production for the film moved to Pinewood Studios in England. And why exactly the move from Cinecittà Studios in Rome? Because star Marlon Brando had a warrant out for his arrest, so therefore could not be in Italy to film. Yeah, quite the conundrum. Adding to the confusion was Hamilton's recent tax exile status, meaning he was not allowed in England for more than 30 days, which would have put the production in a very bad place. He was promptly replaced by Richard Donner, whose recent film, The Omen, was a massive success. Mario Puzo, David Newman, Leslie Newman, Robert Benton, and Tom Mankiewicz all had their hands in writing the screenplay. With these being the writers of such classics as The Godfather, Bonnie and Clyde, and Live and Let Die, the movie was off to a great start. At least that's how it would appear. Puzo's script was deemed to be too long and detailed, so he left after a second draft, losing interest in the character. Benton and David Newman were then brought on to rewrite Puzo's script and break it into 2 films. Due to Benton's commitments to The Late Show, Newman's wife Leslie was brought in as his writing partner. Considered much more modern and filled with campy humor, the main problem still persisted. The script was too long. When Donner came aboard as director, he brought Mankiewicz with him to rewrite the script. The WGA was strict about not having more than 4 writers on the movie. He was relegated to the position of creative consultant, despite the fact that, in his own words, he didn't use a word from the prior screenplays. But with the reworked screenplay by Mankiewicz, Donner could now get to work finding his Superman. The list of studio-approved actors that were considered for the lead role is a who's who of Hollywood, with such giants as Al Pacino, James Caan, Steve McQueen, and Dustin Hoffman. But the glamour of getting into skin-tight spandex was still a few decades off, so most were uninterested. Once the hiring process started, an official offer was given to Robert Redford, which he turned down. This continued with Burt Reynolds. Eventually, Paul Newman was offered $4 million to take on either Superman, Lex Luthor, or Superman's father, Jor-El. But still, the offer was declined. Getting an A-lister just wasn't in the cards. So instead, the focus shifted towards finding an unknown and populating some of the other roles with big names. After seeing hundreds of auditions, Christopher Reeve, who had only appeared on TV shows like Love of Life and The Wide World of Mystery, had managed to impress producers enough to win the role. He had both the physical attributes and a certain boyish charm when playing Clark. Oddly enough, in order to get into proper Superman-level shape, Reeve entered into a bodybuilding program supervised by none other than the physical form of Darth Vader himself, David Prowse. Results that clearly paid off. Marlon Brando was cast as Kal-El's father, Jor-El. And like many roles before it, Brando brought his interesting way of doing things. He notoriously wanted to do as little work as possible on set, even convincing Richard Donner to film during the rehearsal takes. That's not even getting into his salary, which started at $3.5 million, but was increased after disputes with the producers that had him removed from the second film. In a somewhat odd move, Jeff East was cast as a young Clark Kent, despite being only 5 years younger than Reeve. Why not just have Christopher Reeve play the high school role as well with a little bit of makeup? Adding to the confusion, Reeve dubbed over all of East's dialogue, so you never once hear Jeff's voice in the film. To make matters worse, producers never informed East of this during filming. It's an odd decision, but it's honestly really hard to notice and works fairly well, all things considered.
Is it showing off and somebody's doing the things he's capable of doing?
Oh, and I'm not going to criticize the fact that these teenagers look like they're about 30. Have you seen teenagers from this era? They look about 40, so if anything, this is a win. Going back to the Kent farm, Glenn Ford and Phyllis Thaxter starred as Clark's parents, Jonathan and Martha. They're the two that shape who Clark is, so their conveyance of all things good is pretty pivotal to the story. And given that this period is given the least amount of screen time, they really needed to make an impact early, and they nailed it. When we get to the Daily Planet, there's a whole slew of fascinating characters, each one more interesting than the last. You've got the boss, Perry White, played expertly by Jackie Cooper. He's a fast talker whose command of the Daily Planet newsroom makes the hierarchy clear without a word needing to be spoken. Then there's teenage photographer Jimmy Olsen. While Olsen was Mark McClure's most famous role, some of you may remember him as Marty's brother in Back to the Future. And last but not least, star reporter Lois Lane, played expertly here by Margot Kidder. Kidder had been in films such as 92 in the Shade and the phenomenal Black Christmas. Here she gave Lois all the qualities we would grow to love: her fierceness, her loyalty to the truth, and her puppy dog love for Superman. It's a great performance, and there's electricity whenever Reeve and Kidder are on screen together. Their famous flying scene is one of the most magical of the movie, and leaves a massive impression. Taking on the part of Superman's arch nemesis Lex Luthor was Gene Hackman, known for movies such as The Poseidon Adventure, The Conversation, and The French Connection. Luthor is Superman's greatest villain, so to have an actor the caliber of Hackman to encompass him is a dream come true. Unfortunately, Hackman didn't quite see the role like it was in the comics. Or rather, he didn't like the look. Refusing to wear a bald cap until the final scene of the movie, Donner instead opted to style Gene's hair in various ways, to make it appear like different wigs were in different states of dishevelment. The illusion works fairly well. Working alongside Lex Luthor is his assistant/love interest, Eve Tessmacher. Valerie Perrin stands out because she feels like more than just Lex's girlfriend. In fact, she's pretty vital to the story. Finally, we've got Ned Beatty playing Otis, who may be just the dumbest oaf of a henchman out there. How Luthor puts up with him, I'll never know. If you've never seen Superman, the story is simple enough. Young Kal-El escapes his dying planet of Krypton and crash lands in rural Kansas. Now Clark Kent, he's raised to be a good person and sets off to use his Kryptonian powers for the good of humanity. Only he's got one really big problem. Lex Luthor. See, Luthor is all about money and power and going about getting them in not so honest ways. You can see why he wouldn't be a fan of Supes. Like any good villain, he has a plan to kill Superman with his one weakness, kryptonite. That way he can set off a massive bomb on the San Andreas fault line, sending the coast of California into the ocean, and making way for new beachfront, all owned by LexCorp. It's honestly pretty genius, albeit completely insane. In the midst of Luthor's crazy scheme, he manages to get Lois Lane killed. This is when we find out that Superman doesn't just have super strength, super speed, bulletproof skin, the ability to fly, laser eyes, X-ray vision, and freeze breath. He can also turn back time. And how does he do that? Well, he flies ridiculously fast around Earth, which causes time to go backwards. Because that's how things work in this world. And God bless him for it. We get the very storybook ending of Superman saving the day and dropping Lex Luthor off at prison. Oh, and we finally get a look at Lex in his full bald glory. Thank God for bald caps. Superman saved the day and the bad guy has been defeated. It's the most good versus evil way of storytelling out there, and that's why it works so much. Heck, that's why the Superman character as a whole works so much. Because sometimes we just really want to see something good and pure doing what's right. When it comes to the visuals, there were loads of amazing effects work done in the film. Take this shot of a young Clark kicking a football into the stratosphere. These days it would have been entirely CGI. But here, they actually stuck a cannon in the ground and then shot the ball out of the sky. It's extremely impressive. Then there's the flying, which pretty much became the standard for any sort of flying scene from here on out, with its dynamic movement. No more just hanging still in front of a projector anymore. That's not to say there weren't issues. All of these effects meant problems, which often meant delays. John Williams has created some of the most instantly recognizable scores ever, and Superman is no exception. The opening credits, as well as this theme over top of it, is absolutely iconic in every way. While the studio wanted the film to release in the summer months, preferably in June for the character's 40th anniversary, the massive delays in filming pushed the film to December. This delay also meant that they abandoned their plan to film the sequel along with the first film, despite the fact that they filmed over 75% of it. But just focusing on the original film, they were able to push through and make its December date. When it finally made its debut, it broke various profit records for Warner Brothers. And it wasn't just audiences that were enamored. Critics loved it. In 2021 speak, it had a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is rarefied air. Superman's success actually carried over into awards season. The amazing special effects of Superman were awarded with a Special Achievement Academy Award for visual effects. Unfortunately, despite its nominations for Best Film Editing, Best Sound, and Best Original Score, this was the only award the film received from the Academy. For many years, Superman was the benchmark for how to do a comic book movie right. Christopher Reeve is Superman. Every person to play the role since has been compared to him, some entirely basing their performance off of his. But it's not just his Superman that's so special. The boyish charm he displays as Clark Kent and shy body language are such a contrast to the cape-donning superhero that you totally buy into the fact that no one recognizes that these two people are the same. 50 years from now, people will still be comparing whoever is playing Superman at the time back to Christopher Reeve. In the year since, a 3-hour television version was released that included extra scenes, but this version has been admonished by its director, Richard Donner, who refers to this version as nothing more than a work print. Some fans, however, absolutely love this cut. It gives you a little bit more insight into the character of Superman, and honestly just gives you some really fun moments. None of these scenes are what you would call pivotal to the story, so it's easy to see why Donner isn't a fan of them. However, with how much they add dimensions to the characters, it's also easy to see why fans have latched onto this cut of the film. While it was only available in full screen for many years, fan demand and the luck of finding the original negative allowed Warner Brothers to release a fully restored extended cut on Blu-ray. The cast of the film has shown up in various DC projects in the years since. Reeve, Kidder, and McClure all showed up on the Superman origin show Smallville as various roles unrelated to their prior characters. Footage of Brando that was shot for Superman 2 was eventually used for Bryan Singer's Superman Returns in 2006, which saw a return to the world of the first two Superman films. This year even saw the release of the comic book Superman 78, which exists in the world of Reeve's Superman, and gives us more insight into the world molded by Richard Donner. Given Donner's unfortunate passing this year, it's a wonderful tribute to both the director and all of the deceased stars from the film, like Reeve and Kidder. Despite it being 43 years since its release, Superman is as timeless as ever. That's due in equal parts to its wonderful direction by Donner, the stellar performances from Reeve, Kidder, and Hackman, and those never-before-seen special effects. They all combine to make one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. With all of the success of the original, there was still the matter of that pesky sequel that was already 75% filmed. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Join us next time. Same movie time, same movie channel. Thank you for watching our show. If you like what you see, please subscribe to our JoBlo Videos channel, tell your friends who like this sort of content, and turn on the bell to receive notifications for all of our latest videos. We're an independent company, and we appreciate all of your support.